Take it home where you spread it around. If you don't like who's in there, vote them out. That's what election day is all about. And the biggest gun we got is called the ballot box. If you don't like who's in there, vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out. And when they're gone, we'll sing and dance and shout. And she'll bring some new ones in, and they will start the show again. And if you don't like who's in there, vote them out.
On the 7th of March, 2019, on WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The title of our episode today is Ilhan Omar 1, Rightwing 0. And we could substitute several nouns there, right-wing, Zionist, whatever you want to call these people that are challenging Ilhan based on a very flimsy story. Let's backtrack here. The latest installment is that she said that these people were acting of a foreign influence or a foreign nation. Well, let's look at the geography first of all and look at what the nation state is. They're talking about the Zionist state of Israel. It is a fact that that particular state is a sovereign state, therefore it is a national state. Okay, we're clearing away some of the brush here. And there is a history there from 1948 on the Balfour, and that was Harry Truman was in charge at that particular time, and the U.S. embracing that particular nation state. And there was a Zionist movement before the state was created. It was created under the auspices of the colonial power, Britain. Of course, after an armed struggle in Palestine, but nonetheless it was created. Now, some of these Zionists that don't know their history, literally, dispute that. They just literally don't know what they're talking about. Period. And ignorance of the facts is actually no excuse at all. Now, in this particular situation, they totally miscalculated. What they assumed was this gentle little lady from Minnesota, mother of a number of young children, that they could run roughshod over her, and they could convince some of their cronies, associates, etc., hyenas in the Congress to quote-unquote punish her, and their friends in the corporate media and wherever else they might be. So thus, for the last week, they've been on every newspaper, headlines here, headlines in her home district there in Minnesota, all placing this on her, when in fact the situation was there before she was born. The occupation of Palestine. And that is actually a historical fact. You can go to any atlas, you'll find Palestine. And Gaza is occupied. There's no getting around that. There's a history of the occupation there, well documented by the UN. In fact, the UN labeled the General Assembly Zionism as racism. But you have these Zionists out here trying to call people anti-Semitic, call people racist. They can say anything they want. They've attacked the person at this mic. Well, so what? As Madonna said, well, this is a general audience, but they know what Madonna had to say about them. F them. But the whole point there is that this particular situation, we were looking at Haaretz. Haaretz is a military newspaper in Israel, that they basically dared her to move forward. Well, their problem is they're in Tel Aviv, and she's in Washington, D.C. She's a representative of the American people. All stripes, colors, classes, etc. in her home district there in Minnesota. Now that district has a history, 6 times elected Keith Ellison, another Muslim, a man that they tried to slander as being associated with the Honorable Louis Farrakhan of Chicago. That did work. He ran for re-election 5 times after that and was rewarded by the people of Minnesota. He's now the Attorney General of Minnesota. So this is a new day, a new age. And part of the miscalculation was that Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and other progressives that are running for president are organizing. Bernie's goal is to organize 1 million people to organize and moving in that situation and to raise monies necessary for the organization effort. Elizabeth Warren is organizing also, and these people are organizing block by block, street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood, city by city, county by county, state by state, and all across the 50 states. Now, what had happened here was the followers of O.J. Simpson in the Congress, of course they were represented by the Black Caucus, said, no, we're not going to let this type of crass racism go unchallenged. The progressives in the Congress said, no, this is not going to be. The progressive organizations outside of the Congress said, no, this is not going to be. So the leadership under Nancy Pelosi out of San Francisco and the rest of her team decided that they would put together a draft resolution as a quote-unquote, I suppose, compromise, not mentioning Iran. Well, but that didn't fly either. So the whole situation is now they've indefinitely postponed this, and this is a victory for Iran. And it is a defeat for the Zionist forces. Now that some of them were there, they still have their little pack there, and now they put the fact out there that they don't give money to candidates. No, they don't. But somewhere here, I don't know if I have it right now, one of the former officials of that organization explained how it was done. It's done in another room. So in other words, if they suggest we give the Congress type A, B, and C, they have another front organization or an existing organization or a PAC. The money is given there and the money is passed on. So in other words, the deal is still done, and they've been doing it for years. That's the reason if you start looking down the list, there's a number of presidential candidates out here that have not defended Iran. So in other words, so far the list is with Bernie and Elizabeth Warren. But that is just part of the situation. There is a generational shift in the Congress, and the demographics in the U.S. do not favor them. Why? Because the progressives are just starting to organize now. Did that in 2018. And in 2020, there will be more organization in 2021, and then you start looking at 2024 and 4 years after. As the former President Barack Obama said, to get this nation on the proper progressive path, it would take more than 8 years of Barack Obama. You would need at least 3, perhaps 4 different presidents. So in other words, this short-term thinking of theirs, for those of them that are still around in 10 or 15 years, this country will look different. The politics will look different. Period. And it is starting to move there. Now, yes, there's setbacks in terms of DJ Trump, but there are a lot of reasons for those setbacks and why DJ Trump was able to, as they say, inch into the office. Many of those started with the Democratic Party and some of these same characters that shut Bernie out and disrespected Bernie in these primaries and stole votes from him. And then they mounted an incompetent national campaign. So you'll hear in the news now what the Mueller investigation is doing and not doing. Seen some recent reports basically saying that the report could not be as catastrophic as it would be. Well, the Democratic Party, and I'm not a member of the Democratic Party, but if it based its forward progress on one report, they can forget it. And now they've wasted its valuable time taking on Representative Omar, which has went nowhere. And then DJ Trump chimes in about anti-Semitism, and this is a fellow that appointed as his principal advisor at the White House a Nazi. So in other words, if you can do that and get away with it, why are these same characters not attacking DJ Trump? Well, they tried to attack him a little bit after Pittsburgh, but they folded up. Even the leader there, what is called a rabbi, was given a tour of the church. I just wonder if he shined his shoes. But this whole point is that when this happens, good people are to the sideline, whether they are forced to the sideline or not. But there are things as Jews for Peace, etc. There's a long line of organizations that have come to this woman's aid. And that's what will go down in history as a positive fact. Let me go through the Washington Post, and then we'll go to Glenn Ewalt. No, it's not Glenn Ewalt this time around, but it is The Intercept and their take on this. But firstly, let me go to Nancy Pelosi. The headline here: Democratic divide over Omar's remarks tests Pelosi's ability to unify the caucus. Well, she's unified the caucus in the decision not to do anything. House finds themselves in one of these trickiest battles on Capitol Hill, trying to prove their unity in the fight against DJ Trump on core issues they campaigned for last year. Well, very good idea to stick to that. They have a remarkably effective 2 months in the majority to find Trump on his demand for his little border wall, and it appears that he may have to actually go to a veto to get that wall. They then pass a significant bill that requires expanded background checks on gun purchases. They are poised to approve an expansive bill that revamp ethics in electoral laws. But those early wins are threatened by growing controversy of how the Speaker resolves dispute with some outspoken first-term Democrats related to Israel, an ideological and a generational fault line that could end up sowing more division amongst Pelosi's ranks than for the bigger fights. Well, this sometimes has to happen. Circa Ilhan Omar, who is one of two Muslim women elected to Congress, too few, remarks about the so-called loyalty to the Zionist state after the leadership signaled a willingness to advance a softly worded resolution, as we talked about that. Omar's allies have rallied to her defense and accused the Pelosi's leadership team of inappropriately singling out the Somali refugee. Led by AOC, that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Rashina, I'm sorry about that, Tlaib from Michigan, has a seat of John Conyers. Fellow freshman Democrats defended her, sidelining the original resolution. Now leaders are cobbling together a broader draft that would oppose any form of offensive action, which is a joke. It may seem trivial, a non-binding resolution expressing opposition to intolerance of all kinds, but this is a critical test for leadership to bring the caucus back together. On Wednesday, in a closed-door meeting, Democrats erupted over the issue. Hakeem Jeffers, he's from New York, tried to explain the divisions only undermining the broad effort. Our diversity is our strength, our unity is our power, and whatever we have been unified on, we've been successful. Jeffers, he's the caucus chair, and he recited the efforts to the Affordable Care Act, etc. Ocasio-Cortez has been the face of the new Green Deal. The loosely defined umbrella effort to reduce carbon emissions is a good idea. Omar has a prominent seat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which is chaired by Eliot Engel, a New York, a prominent supporter of the Zionist state. Like Ocasio-Cortez and Omar, Engel is a prominent supporter of Medicare for All legislation unveiled last week. Well, that's good. Tlaib has emerged as one of the highest profile voices demanding the impeachment of DJ Trump. She needs to rethink that one. Pelosi and the majority leader, you don't hear him much. Steny Hoyer, he's been around a long time, needs to end the tension over Omar to build a trust for the legislative battles ahead, else the individuals involved in will all of a certain feed and take out their feed aggressive and take out more prominent issues. There ain't going more prominent. Okay. Agreed. I'm sorry. It's very important that we get everybody back on the same page. That's from Marcia Fudge. She's an African American from Ohio. Israel's become a divisive issue in the Democratic caucus that, in years past, tended to agree with Engel's position. Now, a younger flank of it views Benjamin Netanyahu as a government as oppressive and aligned with the Republicans. No doubt about that. The Zionists in Israel and Bibi Netanyahu has and their Likud party, a very right-wing party, are essentially fascists. And this is what the dynamic has changed on the international scene. In many countries, particularly in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, majority of the world is joined in the boycott of the Zionist state, and they know it. See, this is one of the situations there. Netanyahu has aligned himself with the new fascists in Brazil, Bolsonaro. So in other words, this situation is coming out to being more and more an international situation. Republicans scored an unusual early victory a few weeks ago when they fashioned a procedural amendment to serve as a rebuff of anti-Semitism, and it passed overwhelmingly. GOP leaders now are waiting other such motions to divide Democrats, leading Pelosi's team to consider a rules change that would hinder Republican efforts at division. We talked about that in this space also. The idea of basically rehearing and amending a bill. The new resolution, whenever it's unveiled, is likely to include condemnation of anti-Semitism, racism, white supremacy, Islamophobia, homophobia, and the rise in hate. Well, if you start doing all this, by its very definition, if you condemn racism, you condemn Zionism. So where does that get you? Nowhere. Jeffers, the number 5, ran the weekly caucus meeting and hosted a news conference afterwards. And basically, they had 13 questions he faced. One of them focused on the content of an ethics bill. We can't have ethics when there is no ethical situation to put it on. Pelosi entered a closed-door meeting. She admonished the media for fixating on Representative Omar's controversy. The press loves to ferment on ease in the Democratic Party. But we are very unified, she said. She told the types. But one of the things, and obviously Nancy Pelosi knows this, that the commercial media and many other patsies out there are not aligned with her or the Democratic Party. A few minutes later, the caucus erupted over how to handle the latest dispute. And this is an unusual situation. There's usually not a debate on how to handle a foreign entity. Let's say, for instance, that we substitute the Israeli state for China. There would not be this. I mean, there are millions of Chinese in this country, and if the Chinese had a China pact, and there's been instances where various Chinese groups have given money to presidential campaigns. And they hire lobbyists. All these nations now hire lobbyists, so what's new about that? Nothing. A few weeks later, We are very diverse. That's Fudge. She's from Ohio. Said, well, okay, well, they are. Anyway, to old Wilbur Ross here, some of the more important things. Broke the law, violated the Constitution, the census decision. That was a ruling given here by a federal judge. I believe it was in San Francisco. District Judge Seaborg of San Francisco went from a similar decision by Judge Jess Furman in New York. Supreme Court has already agreed to review Furman's narrow decision, with arguments set on the 23rd of April. The Commerce Department, who is charged with dealing with this, had nothing to say. The case against Ross has been brought by jurisdictions with significant immigrant populations, but only 2 completed trials. Case heard by Furman, brought by 18 states, led by New York. And today's initiated by the state of California, combined with a suit brought by the city of San Jose. Unable to find the expert in the Census Bureau who approved his plan to answer citizenship question, Seaborg wrote, Ross engaged in a cynical search to find some other reason, any reason justify the decision. He was aware that the question would produce a census undercount, particularly amongst Latinos. This would probably reduce representation in Congress, thus the Electoral College that decides the president, which states of significant immigrant populations, most notably California. Because the census historically is just a count of persons within the U.S. They don't have to be citizens. All they have to be is persons. They can't be cattle or horses or whatever else you want to count, because the census data is used to apportion distributed federal funds, and undercount would also have cheated those same jurisdictions. The judge said Seaborg, like Furman, found after a trial that Ross had misrepresented both the public and the Congress Congress his reasons for adding the citizenship question. Ross claimed he was acting at the request of the Justice Department in the interest of the Voting Rights Act. Liar. In reality, the evidence established that the Voting Rights Act exclamation was just a pretext, and that Ross acted in bad faith when he claimed otherwise. He pursued the citizenship question after hearing from now this is Stephen Bannon, the known fascist here, and Kobach, the former chair of this disbanded committee, the former Secretary of State in the state of Kansas, the former candidate for governor that was defeated. Apart from violating the Constitution, Seaborg ruled that the Commerce Department breached the the Administrative Procedure Act by acting arbitrary and capricious, and violated the Census Act restriction on modifying questions. That is it in the moat. I'll save Hillary Clinton's claim of voter suppression in Georgia and Wisconsin. That has been talked of other than the Monster Clinton before. On to Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar, we have a major monopoly problem. She's correct about this, and she should speak more about it. It's a common theme unifying Democratic candidates for president. If the argument is the U.S. is facing a rising inequality problem, one exacerbated by concentration of power and money in the hands of a relative few. Does the U.S. have a monopoly problem? We have major monopoly problems. We've seen 50% increase in mergers. We've seen a lot of mergers last year, and we've seen a number of trillion-dollar companies. That doesn't mean every big company is bad, but it means is we're seeing more and more consolidation of power. The problem is our antitrust laws haven't attacked the change in the kind of businesses we have. Let's start with the courts, and this is under Brett Kavanaugh and Gossage. I have a number of opinions that actually are more conservative than the court has been in terms of how they interpret antitrust law. Remember, the champion of antitrust law was none other than Teddy Roosevelt. First is tech. We have been able to move more privacy legislation for years. The second area is pharma, big pharma, which literally has 3 lobbyists for every member of the Congress. That's a lot of them. several thousand. A number of antitrust critics have called for breaking up of Facebook. Do you agree there? And you can reflect the performance of the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, in particular, on AT&T and Time Warner. I agree that the ongoing forward lawsuit to block the deal. I certainly didn't agree with the reasoning being CNN. There are two competent people, the FCC chairman and the antitrust chief, Duranium. They know what they're doing, but instead of taking this on as a general antitrust issue, which I wish the administration would do, the president actually undercuts it by using a political grenade. And we need to change those laws as we look at other factors like monopolies. It's a chance to, oh boy, I wouldn't mention him, a chance to follow this Robert Bork. People remember him. When I was when I went to University of Chicago, by the way, by the approach, but it's not like a given that is where the court's going to stay forever in terms of that. Yes, the University of Chicago is a law school. Bork was there. We need more funds into agencies that we need to change the standard there. So this is one of her contributions there. So, and kind of, this is something we were going to cover the other day, from $22 an hour to $11 an hour. The GM cuts in Ohio show how the economy is still leaving parts of America behind. This is in Lordstown. We in an early episodes last year talked about Lordstown. Nonetheless, the big hammer dropped on Wednesday. They closed the GM, that is, closed the plant in Lordstown. Now, GM workers that are there, if there are openings, can transfer to other GM plants. The unfortunate thing is some of these workers can't simply move. Cicero Davis, he's one of the people pitches out, is not optimistic about Lordstown will return. He worked at the plant installing batteries for the crews and was cut at the initial round of layoffs in 2017. His buddies on the battery line told him he would see him again soon, but he's one of the first to enroll in. This is a training program here. Temporary layoffs are common in the automobile industry, no doubt about that. Turbo County, where the plant is located, voted blue for decades, but it swung to DJ Trump in 2016. Now they've been rewarded with it. Davis was at GM for only 2 years before the layoffs, and he's still considered a temporary worker, meaning he was paid about $20 an hour versus a permanent worker that was paid $30 an hour. He felt less loyal to the company, and was one of few workers at the plant driving a Honda. Anyway, when he heard about the TA, he quickly signed up for the classes, earned his commercial driver's license. That's a shortage of commercial. The trucking school did the training and driving on the road in front of the GM plant. Anyway, today he's making more money than he did at GM shortly after earning his trucker's license. He got a full-time job as an overnight correctional officer. Pays about $20 an hour with a good benefits. In all these small towns, they have these correctional institutes. I thought he was driving a truck. He could have gotten that one also very easy and made more money than that. Anyway, GM workers click more often on job postings for service reps, store clerks, warehouse jobs, and team assemblers, according to analysis of Indeed. That's the for the Washington Post. All these jobs have an average annual salary of about $35,000. And some do go to retail, but again, GM has been a heartbeat of working class areas, providing a middle class living. for tens of thousands of families. Not anymore. This is Lordstown here. I guess this is the obit we just wrote. Let me do one other check on the time here. Okay. One other thing I wanted to get in. This is predict.com, excuse me, at the latest yes price. Who will win the presidential thing? 23 cents. Bernie Sanders, 20 cents. Joe Lunchbox Biden, 19 cents. Kamala Harris. Beto O'Rourke's at 17 cents, and the rest of them in the single digits. Elizabeth Warren, 7 cents. Twitter King Book at 6 cents, I guess. And Amy Klobuchar at 6 cents also, and Shed Brown. Well, no big deal there. You can vote on them, probably end up in pretty good shape. Well, let's see if we can find this. Otherwise, we will have to... We have a Reuters poll out here, and I'm just wondering if we have to look. We'll have this tomorrow night because we have to. Wait a minute. I can do a little bit of this quickly here. We have the Monmouth poll here. Oops. What happened? We had it. Here we go. DJ Trump is at 44%, 45%. There was an article I posted, incidentally, on, this is on Wednesday, Facebook. Old Russ Limbaugh was talking about the situation of DJ Trump getting reelected. The Politico's poll, that's the Morning Consult, that's how they were weak, has him at 42%, and the Reuters poll, Ipsos poll at 39%. And the only one that has him up there is an outliner, Rasmussen. They've been at 48. That fools people. Incidentally, the YouGov poll is now an internet poll, and well, it always was. Excuse me. The one also went internet was the Pew poll, and this was on Tuesday. This is the Morning Consult. 31%. Joe Lunchbox Biden. Then Bernie Sanders at 27, Harris at 11, Warren at 7, Beto O'Rourke at Booker at 4, Beto O'Rourke at 6, and the others at 3%. Amy Klobuchar, she's got to start doing better than that. And the one old rush was the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, had old DJ Trump at 46%. And let me see if I can get this other one here. We're having a little... No. I don't... No, this is not the one. I'll probably have to do that... This is Politico, postponed indefinitely. We know about that. No. Effectively, it was the same. Let's see if I'm. No. I think I can do this one if I can get it. This is by from The Nation. How is it that the AIP PAC really works? Now, this is by M.J. Rosenberg, the AIPAC and AIPAC and Capitol Hill veteran, explains the lobbyist tactics moving forward. This is a very good article. One thing we should be said about Representative Ilhan Omar's tweet about the power of this is American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, known as AI Public Affairs Committee, anyway, are the Israeli lobbyists. Is that hysterical reaction to it proves her point. The power of the PAC over members of Congress is literally awesome, although not in a good way. Has anyone ever seen so many members of Congress of both parties running into the microphones and sending out press releases to denounce one first term for criticizing the power of a lobby? Somehow I don't think the reaction would have been the same if she had tweeted that Congress still supports the ethanol subsidy because the American Farm Bureau and other components of the corn ethanol lobby spend millions of dollars to keep agro-business bonanza going. That American politics, the only difference between all domestic lobbies and essentially buy support for their agendas, is that the AI PAC is working for a foreign government. It is distinct, not just as much as difference when the goal is to maintain the status quo that is not necessarily in the national interest. What Omar tweeted was so terrible anyway. Actually, it was two tweets that produced the unsettled but telling coming together DJ Trump and Pelosi in a common denunciation of first term member of Congress. Omar's crime is daring to suggest that campaign contribution orchestrated by that committee played a large part in achieving bipartisan support for anything proposed by the Israeli government. That, of course, is something everyone knows, and even a former president once admitted, this is of the American-Israeli PAC, in a conversation that was recorded by an interlocutor. In fact, in 1968, 60 Minutes did a segment on the PAC, dibbing up money. Moreover, I was an employee of the lobby from 1973, 1975, 1982 to 86, repeatedly and personally witnessed the whole process of funding and defunding. Additionally, I spent close to 20 years as an administrative assistant to Democrat House and Senate members and saw the tactics and rewards and retribution from a vantage point too. Officially, of course, it doesn't engage, this is a PAC, in political fundraising. It would be illegal to do so. The lobby is vehement on the point that it does not. It is true, to my knowledge, it does not directly raise money to support or defeat candidates. But that is just a technical, political funding is a huge part of the operation. One of those three top positions in a massive D.C. headquarters is that of the political director, who runs both the Washington political operation. His annual salary is over $450,000. And the deputy regional directors around the country, here's how they describe their offices do, as in the wanted signs, assist with the planning and execution of local congressional club events and congressional club components in local areas. I won't go over all these, I'll append this. Not to mention is that what the information is used for political fundraising. That means making sure the pro-Israeli PAC knows what to do with their money. This is why the AI has a large national operation, period. Again, I know this because I witnessed it over and over again, sitting in the meetings there and discussing we would support, which campaigns we'd support, whom we were going to destroy. The annual convention attracts 20,000 of these characters in there, and virtually the entire Congress at which fundraising pitches were made. The APAC, of course, denies that anyone raises money at its political conferences. That is true. No one does in the official room. However, also the side rooms, normally independent of the main event, just down the hall, where candidates and invited donors, only really wealthy donors get the invite, meet and decide which candidates will get what. So in other words, this is how it's done there, and now she's got better information. She should read in the Congressional Record. The bottom line is, despite all the congressional denunciations of Omar and the hypothetical denials of the AIPAC, buys support for the Zionists. With it, the Benjamins, the times are changing. On October the 5th, when AIPAC combining the BDS bill passed the Senate, Democrats, Senate, 22 Democrats voted against it. This is a decent number, but the real signal was that his power is waning on every Democratic senator who's a candidate for president, except Amy Klobuchar. Amy stood up. She voted no because they were seeking to win support for the which is naturally enough skews younger and younger and more progressive. And hence more sympathy for the Palestinians. That would have happened before, wouldn't happen before 2016, when Bernie Sanders embraced the Palestinians and the cause as part of his coalition. For now, with the baby boomers a still more influential segment of the population, the AIPAC is holding its own, even happily raising money over the whole, no doubt, Omar incident. But the future looks dim, and this is what we said at the forecast. This is how the AIPAC really works by Mr. Rosenberg. And we'll just have to put it back up here. We can't miss out on something like this. We'll do this in a minute here. Now let's do the sports. Do something more pleasant here. Now I find Republican Democrats say their criticism of Ilhan Omar is about it. They're gaslighting you. This is from The Intercept. I'll get this on a different program. You can't get everything on every program. You're right. Here we go. Now we'll start out with men's basketball here. In an overtime, LSU was at Florida. LSU 79-78, and the second game, Marquette at Seton Hall. It was Seton Hall 73-64. And to the women's part of it, had only one game here. Texas was at TCU. Texas 22-48 over TCU. The National Basketball Association, Mr. LeBron James, did a feat. Now he's only behind Kareem and several others. Anyway, the Heat and the Hornets. It was a Heat 91-84. And the T-Wolves and Pistons in the Motor City. Pistons 31-114. The Mavericks and Wizards in D.C. Wizards 132-123 for the Mavericks. The Spurs and Hawks in Atlanta. Spurs 111-104. The Cavaliers and Nets. The Nets 113-107. The 76ers and Bulls in Chicago. Bulls 108-107. 1 point game. That Jazz and Pelicans doesn't get any better than that. The Jazz 114-104 for the Pelicans down to Big Easy. I guess they have now sobered up. Anyway, the Knicks and the Suns in Arizona. The Suns 107-96. The Celtics were at the Kings out in California. Celtics 111-109. And finally, the Nuggets were in Los Angeles. Nuggets 115-99 for the Lakers. On to Major League Baseball, the spring training, that is. The Pirates and Sox. It was the Pirates 6-1. Atlanta and the Marlins. Atlanta shut the Marlins out 4-0. Sort of like Ilhan did to the right-wing characters. Anyway, the Orioles and Rays, Orioles 9-6. The Cardinals and Yankees, it was the Cardinals 9-5. Let's see if they can do it in regular season. The Tigers in Atlanta, it was Atlanta 8-2. The Mariners and the Astros, it was all Astros 11-5. The Phillies and the Blue Jays 9-7. The Diamondbacks and Brewers, it was the Brewers 5-4. The Giants and Rangers 12-5. The Royals and Cubbies pull one out 4-1. The Angels and Rockies, Angels 6-5. Padres and Reds 6-4. And the Athletics and Mariners 7-4 there, Athletics. And Cleveland and the Dodgers 6-1. Cleveland over the Dodgers. And finally, the National Hockey Association, Capitals and Flyers, it was a Capitals 6-3. The Maple Leafs and Canucks in overtime, Canucks 3-2. The Blues and Ducks 5-4. Blues over the Ducks. And finally, the Flames and Golden Knights of Las Vegas, it was the Golden Knights 2-1. At least it's in the winter. This will do it for us. We'll see you on the Monday morning quarterback. We'll have some other programming also, but on Friday Java, the Monday morning quarterback on Monday morning. You can see we've been working all night coding. Anyway, so that's where we'll be. We'll have a Numbers Man report. We have about 85% of our open source report. We'll get it out this weekend. And anything else we can think of. Nonetheless, this episode on the 7th of March 2019, Omar 1, Right Wingers 0, Representative Omar will work with that. Good day.